The Center for Truth and Justice has strongly condemned the recent local government elections in Rivers State, describing the process as a travesty of democracy and an assault on the rule of law. The group also slammed Governor Siminalayi Fubara for wasting taxpayers' resources on an exercise which they deemed as a blatant disregard to democratic principles and a consolidation of power. In his address, the Executive Director Obinna Francis said the election was marred by irregularities, including a lack of transparency, accountability, and legitimacy. He cited a federal high court judgment restraining the Independent National Electoral Commission (INEC) from releasing voters' registers to the Rivers State Independent Electoral Commission, which was allegedly overridden by Governor Fubara. The group further criticized Governor Fubara's use of proxy parties to advance his political agenda and the involvement of the Rivers State Independent National Electoral Commission in the illegitimate process. The group called on relevant authorities, including the National Assembly, judicial and international community, to intervene and restore the rule of law in Rivers State. The group urged Nigerians to remain vigilant and defend democracy, emphasizing that the actions of Governor Fubara threatens the democratic process made as a nation.
Governor Fubara's disregard for the law extends to the recent conduct of a sham local government election in Rivers State. The election, which was conducted within the government house, is an embarrassment to the state and the nation as a whole. This process lacked transparency, accountability, and legitimacy. There were no observers, no genuine electoral oversight, and no opportunity for the people of Rivers State to make their voices heard. Instead, it was a coronation, not an election, a process aimed at installing Governor Fubara's puppets in key positions of power across the state. It is pertinent to mention that a judgment from a federal high court in Abuja had already restrained the Independent National Electoral Commission from releasing voters' registers to the Rivers State Independent Electoral Commission. This judgment was meant to preserve the integrity of the electoral process and to ensure that no election could take place without due process. The judgment also restrained the Inspector General of Police, Kayode Egbetokun, from providing security for such a sham process. Yet, in typical fashion, Governor Fubara obtained a questionable court order to override this judgment, demonstrating his utter contempt for the judiciary and the rule of law. Hence, the involvement of Rivers State Independent Electoral Commission in this illegitimate process raises serious concerns about the impartiality and independence of the electoral body. Rather than upholding the sanctity of the electoral process, the Rivers State Independent Electoral Commission has become a tool in Governor Fubara's hands to manipulate elections and install his loyalists in office. This flagrant abuse of power must be addressed if we are to preserve the integrity of future elections in Rivers State and Nigeria at large. Additionally, Governor Fubara's manipulation of the electoral process extended to the use of proxy parties to advance his political agenda. The so-called Action People's Party, APP, a relatively unknown political entity, conveniently won 22 out of 23 chairmanship seats in the Rivers State local government elections. This result, which defies all logic and understanding, is the culmination of a highly orchestrated and manipulated electoral process aimed at securing Governor Fubara's dominance over local government structures in the state. Moreover, it is important to emphasize that this election was conducted in the face of widespread protests from members of the People's Democratic Party, PDP, and the All Progressive Congress, APC, as well as civil society organizations. These protests were not without reason. The election was held despite the refusal of the police to provide security. The state government and Rivers State Independent Electoral Commission have boldly declared the election to be smooth, safe, free, fair, credible, transparent, and violence-free. This blatant attempt to legitimize a boycotted and illegal election is not only an insult to the people of Rivers State, but also an assault on the intelligence of all Nigerians. Furthermore, The Center for Truth and Justice calls on all relevant authorities, including the National Assembly, the judiciary, and the international community, to urgently intervene in the situation in Rivers State. The abuse of power by Governor Fubara and his enablers must not go unchecked. The rule of law must be restored, and the democratic rights of the people of Rivers State must be protected. If left unchallenged, the actions of Governor Fubara will set a dangerous precedent for other state governors to follow, leading to the complete erosion of democratic governance in Nigeria. You see, if you listen very well from the beginning, the security were not provided, and the venue for the election was the government house. So you can put 2 and 2 together to arrive at the answers. So if an election was conducted in the government house, I think invariably you definitely know that there will be no security and there was no elections. And because there was no election, that was why securities were not provided. If there were elections all over the state, security must have been provided. And because they have already made their plans not to hold the election as it was supposed to hold, there was no provision for security. And therefore, that was what amounted to this. It was not an election, but a selection that was done by Governor Fubara. And this is what the Center for Truth and Justice stands against. People are supposed to express their rights, their civil rights, not being differentiated by the governor. Because people that came out to vote were not given that right to vote. No electoral materials were provided for anybody, and so there was no election. So it was just a selection. And that was the reason why there was no security operatives around. Thank you.
There was no election in Rivers State. Bedroom. Yes. Yes, there was no election in Rivers State.
So that means it did not even pass for your...
As you can see, there was court order that the election should not go.
Yeah.
So people were at home. So he just wrote the
result and announced.
Inside his bedroom.
And it was announced.
The INEC official announced. Are you saying that the INEC official are working in collaboration with the...
Those people you saw there are not INEC officials. They are his siblings. That is just his family members that announce the results.